and security and our competitiveness, the societal challenges that we face in climate change, which hasn't gone away, in spite of maybe some people thinking that here in this country. Healthcare, of course, very important. Energy, very important. We need innovation. We need startups and scale-ups. This is not a luxury. This is something that is an absolute must. It is at the center of everything that the European Union wants to achieve. And so we must get this right. And we will talk about like what is positive about the European Union. We will talk about like what's not working. I mean, I've been here now for 3 years in San Francisco and on the West Coast. And often what you hear is like, well, Europe is really nice place to go on holidays. It's like an open air museum. And then some people say, look, okay, Europe is a museum. Japan is a retirement home. China is a prison. And here, this is like the Valhalla of innovation. This is where everything happens. And we run the world from here. It's not true, of course. I mean, we've got great musea in Europe, but there's more than just musea. I mean, the other thing you hear very often when you are here, when you're posted here is, and I got sick and tired of it, but I still hear it, is like, well, we are over-regulating in Europe. We are the Silicon Valley of regulation and not the Silicon Valley of innovation. And then, of course, regulation stifles innovation. It's like holding us back. And I mean, I always say it's a bit like with wine. I mean, you try to avoid bad wine and just enjoy good wine. And so try to avoid bad regulation. Bad regulation indeed can stifle and probably does stifle innovation. But good regulation, it provides predictability. It builds trust. It levels the playing field. It can actually stimulate and in many cases does promote innovation. So the discussion is much more sophisticated than just like, oh, you regulate and therefore you do not innovate. And I think today we will get like some insight in actually that there's a lot of innovation happening in the European Union, and maybe we are not like successful enough to create big companies out of the innovation, but definitely the potential is there. And so the question is more, how can we exploit that potential rather than to say, look, there's hardly any innovation in the European Union. And one of the things we're not good at in Europe is to talk positively about ourselves. We tend to talk ourselves down. We are not really good like public relations people or public communications people. We're not like, as the US people would say, we're not good bullshitters. We can't just bullshit ourselves to say we're really great. We talk about things that aren't working. We aren't talking enough about the things that are working in the European Union. I think today we should talk also about the good things in the European Union. We have a very strong industrial base, and we'll hear a bit more about it from my colleagues later. I mean, we have excellent science and research. We have a very deep talent pool. We have a single market. Okay, it's not firing on all its cylinders, but it is an engine of growth. We have good public services, with good education, healthcare, I mean, public transport. I mean, people complained this morning how difficult it was to get here because the trains, wherever you had to change 2 or 3 times. In Europe, public transport tends to be really good. Healthcare tends to be really good. We have this boring rule of law that we've always taken for granted. Well, it suddenly becomes like a comparative advantage because you do have the predictability. You have a pretty good quality of life as well in the European Union. Maybe not like this weather everywhere, certainly not where I'm from in the Netherlands, but other than that, the quality of life is pretty good. But we don't talk enough about these things. So, of course, we are facing challenges, and we will talk about these challenges today. I mean, how to grow a company is kind of the scaling up phase is very hard in Europe. I mean, the risk-taking, entrepreneurship, there's more work to be done. We can use more of a dose of Silicon Valley in the European Union. So I think one of the issues we need to discuss is how can we build a partnership, particularly in this like rather complicated and sometimes polarized geopolitical environment. How can we continue to work together? How can we invest in each other? I mean, to turn like this street that like has always been, or many ways have been seen as a one-way street from like Europe to Silicon Valley. How can we turn it into a two-way street where we continue to invest, we invest in each other, we help grow innovation, and that will benefit the US, it will benefit the European Union, and it will benefit the world. So that almost like paradigm shift, I think, is we need to start thinking about. I'm going to hand the floor to Francois, or to Joanna. Joanna is the moderator. We have a stellar panel, absolutely outstanding, with very deep knowledge and deep insights about what's happening in Europe and what's happening in this country, and how can we work together, how can we build that kind of relationship, and or reinforce that type of relationship. And Francois will tell a bit more. I mean, we are also ourselves a startup. We started 3 years ago here as an EU office in San Francisco, and we actually came, just Joanna and myself, Joanna, my deputy, and myself. And now, I mean, we're building up capacity. We are 7 plus an intern, and we will be 9 very soon. The colleagues in the Irish Consulate General are beginning to complain a little bit because they thought that was not the bargain when we came. We came and we would be 4, and now we're more than double that. So we have a little bit of a space constraint. Irish people are lovely people, so I'm sure we'll sort that out. So we are ourselves a startup, and we have a bit more capacity as well to work on these issues. And Francois has joined us quite recently. Francois Brizard, he actually comes from the startup agency, ISMEA, in the European Commission, and DG Research and Innovation. And so he's going to take us through. I'm going to hand maybe the microphone first to Joanna, what he will do, an assessment of Europe, what is working in Europe, what is not yet working, and then we'll invite the panel to shed light on where should we go from here. Joanna.
Thank you so much, Gerard. And I'd like to thank you. I'd like to invite Francois to set the scene, to give some data points to support what Gerard was saying. So what's working, what's not working. Francois, give him a big shout out. It's his first Brussels to the Bay, and he's been into the deep waters presenting as our first speaker today. Take it away, Francois.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gerard. Thank you very much, Joanna. So the introduction was done. So my name is Francois. I joined very recently, as you have understood, the office in San Francisco. I have a legal background. If I may pitch what I've done with startups and innovation the last couple of years, I would say in the Silicon Valley that I am part of the co-funding team of the European Innovation Council. I will have the occasion to say a little bit more a bit later, but as it was said, I will maybe first guide you through what we have decided to call a fair due diligence of what Europe is about, and very echoing what Gerhard said in introduction, that there is maybe a shift, maybe a paradigm shift that we must impose in this part of the world. Allow me to say so, and maybe to go back first to some basics. And that's the beauty to come right after Gerhard. I said already a lot. Once things will go on the screen. There is a bit of latence, I guess. Yes, okay, it's going to come. It's not going to come. Okay, hold on. That's my first. That's it. Yeah, there is a bit. Okay, I hope it's not going to jump to the third one. Okay, anyway, so powerhouse of Europe, it was said by Gerhard during the introduction. I think for many of you it will be basics, but allow us sometimes to be a bit basics and go back to the strengths of Europe. A strong historical industrial foundation. I will not quote what we did for the automotive sector, space, aeronautica, coming from a country in France, southwest of France, nearby Toulouse, where if you do not have seen the first flight of A380, you cannot say that you are from Toulouse. World-class universities and research institutions. I could have put there the figures, the pictures of the last Nobel Prize that were announced a couple of days, and all the figures that were the last decades. I will not enter into a comparative analysis with US, but there is a half number of Nobel Prize in Europe and in the US. When it comes to the capacity of our research organization, universities, to train the best talent in the world, there is a very interesting data or statistics in this AI sphere, which is that Europe is producing, if I may say, 30% more AI software per capita than in the US. So there is a huge amount of engineers. We will, of course, discuss what those engineers decide to do and where do they invest and where is the ecosystem for them the most interesting too. But at least in the capacity to generate those knowledge and generate those engineers, if I may say, we are there. Rule of law, predictability, it was also said by Gerhard during the introduction. This is something we have to insist. EU is regulating, yes, but EU is regulating to have a single set of rules among 27 different member states. It is sometimes seen as a complication. It is, for me, bread and butter of simplification the last 10 years. And we can take many examples. You can today travel all around 27 countries without any boundaries. If I may say, it was not something that was given 50 years ago, but this is what Europe is about. And it is the same for capita. It is the same for many of the aspects that are key for innovation and for the startups. We'll come to that slowly. Very strong public service and quality of life, but it was also partially said, of course. For the next one, but yes, I have to anticipate a bit because it takes a bit of time to to go to the next slides. It's going to come. Sorry. That's very slow. Sorry about that, but oh, should I? Okay. Anticipating to the slide. Sorry about that. I hope it's going to be on the screen. The second slide I wanted to present you is in this vein about Innovation Land. Innovation Land to show you and to just recall that the ecosystem in Europe is about interconnected ecosystem in 27 different countries. Not perfect, but slowly but surely interconnected innovation ecosystems. And I would have shown also back-to-back with a slide on investment, a graph which is demonstrating in the field of AI, for example, where we are today in interconnecting all these hubs with about 16 AI factories, gigafactories, which is not only about data center, which is not only about grid, even if grid and edge, of course, is also very much important. It is about the capacity for researchers to access those data centers, the capacity for those startups to benefit to what will be done all across these different interconnected ecosystems in Europe. And we are generating researchers, we are generating excellence research, we are generating a lot of startups. We are generating as much as startups, if not more than startups in the US. We will come slowly, of course, to the weaknesses and the issues we are facing and the reason why those startups do not cross many of the Death Valley. But the fact is that we are generating these startup and deep tech companies. Last but not least, on this point, we have an analysis that was done for the last almost 20 years, since 2022 by Sifted, on the return on investment. Their analysis, we can of course discuss the figures, we can look at it after this session more closely, but these figures are demonstrating that as an average, the European VCs in Europe have a better return than the US VCs when they invest in similar companies. Very slow difference. It is a 12.55 as compared to a 12.65. But nonetheless, when we are investing in Europe in those companies, there is a return. This is also something, and the key messages I think that was important to convey. Thanks a lot for the slides. On the investment, I anticipated a bit. We are investing. We are investing, we have to say it also massively in those interconnected ecosystems. I mentioned about the AI, and you have one of the latest figures here that was shared very recently by our colleagues from the European Commission on the effort which is done in the field. Should I mention the 800 billion in defense? I will not comment the geopolitical situation of the world, but strong signals were given. the member states of European Union is investing today massively in defense, and of course also in tech in defense. When it comes more specifically to deep tech, we started a couple of decades, let's be very honest, very slowly and with very low amount of money invested, and I will come back to that. But if you look at the evolution the last 10 years, we had about 10 times more investment in between 2014 and 2024 in deep tech. So there is a momentum, there is a trend, there is something which is here worth mentioning. The weaknesses, which has, of course, challenges and opportunities. Let's be honest among us. Insufficient risk-taking, there is a cultural approach, we are talking about it. This is something which is known, which is discussed in universities, in the entrepreneurship philosophy that maybe in some part of the Europe we do not have enough, and the capacity then to accompany those that will be developing the innovation of tomorrow. We have a major funding gap. Here I will not put graphs, but when it comes to later stage, it is a matter of fact that in Europe, and not because the liquidity does not exist. If you look at the available liquidity of the European pension funds, this is the $15 trillion. I don't know how many zero there is behind, but if we today would find a way in Europe to have a 0.25% of those 15 trillion that will be invested into the VC, the venture capitalist market, we will be mostly covering the gap with how much it is on a yearly basis invested in the US by the VC. So there is a gap, there is liquidity, there is the need to find a way to activate this community and this ecosystem, and to activate it in a way that it will make sense also in the partnership that we are developing, especially in the Silicon Valley, in the US. Should I also mention, and maybe there is corporate in the room today, the suboptimal role, capacity of the corporate to accompany the startups, to accompany the ecosystem in an efficient manner. Here again, there is many literature that has been published by Dealflow and Dealroom there. If we compare how much the big corporates, the GAFAM in the US or in other parts of the world are, let's say, injecting or re-injecting in the ecosystem as compared to what the European corporates are doing for their own community or supply chain, here again, it is something on which we have to work and to find the best leverage and the best leverage effect, yes, with the corporates. Last one on this one, last point on this slide, the exit and IPO. This is also something that in the frame of what we call in Brussels the investment union we have to work on. We know that our companies are going later into the market with less amount, with less valuation, which is indeed an issue on which we have to one of the answers that was given the last couple of years, and this is where I have the occasion to pitch and to tell you a bit more about the European Innovation Council. I had the chance a little bit before the beginning of this presentation to talk with one of the beneficiaries of this program, but it is most probably not enough yet known in this part of the world. European Innovation Council was born about 7 years ago with taking into consideration the basic elements that I just presented to you. We have still to inject and to continue to invest where we have strengths, so excellence and the capacity to produce startups. But we had also to cover market failure. We do not have enough early stage, but also later stage fund taking the risk and allowing those companies to grow when they need the amount of money that they need. And we know that they can need quite substantial amount of money in also at the very beginning of their growth. At the very beginning, it was an idea and an ambition. It is today, with the number of companies we have selected and invested, the biggest early stage fund in Europe. We have selected about 700 companies today, sign about 400 term sheets. I will come back to that. But we are not doing it in a way that public funding should stay for life. We are doing it because we are covering a market failure. We are doing it because we are giving a signal to the markets, a signal to the VC community, a signal to the corporates, a signal to all the ecosystem that the public funding will play its role to de-risk, to again inject as much as possible in the ecosystem, but at the condition, of course, that the market will also react and help us to allow me, this is one of the things I'm doing on a daily basis since I joined the office. I am looking at our exposure to the US. There is a US traction. There is now almost 130 US co-investors that have co-invested with us in this fund, in those companies, in about more than 120 deals. So here, of course, is very visual graph, but I already told you. So we have all over the world, mainly in Europe, of course, but as you have understood, also in the US, more than 600 VCs, corporate strategic investors, including the 25 first largest VCs in Europe that have co-invested in some of our companies. We have 700 in the pipe, 400 for which I already said it, we have already invested. To scan, you have 10 seconds to scan, so that you will have a look on the deal flow database, which is today available online. Have a look to our companies. Check what we are talking about. We are early stage investors, together with private co-investors, of course. As an average, we put about 2.84 million in equity, but up to 15 in theory. Again, have a look. This is most of the vibrant companies. I think the panel may have at some point also a word to say about it. We have the chance in the panel to have one co-investors that looked very precisely at what we call between us our Champions League, which is what we call the European Scaling Club. So Alberto may have to say a bit more. But please have a look to what we are doing. And I should have mentioned it. This is a portfolio. It was in the slide that will be expanding to dual use and defense. We are not discovering dual use. Many of our companies, they have today potential clients that are working for defense, and their technology are already dual. And subject to validation by the European Parliament and the Council, we may have a top-up of financing that may be available next year to also finance dual use with military applications. So to conclude, where are we going now? We have the conviction at this stage, looking at the ecosystem in Europe, that the public fundings should still play their role in the vein of what EIC was done. And we have in the pipe a so-called Scale Up Europe Fund for 5 billion euros that will be announced by the end of the year, and that should be operational slowly but surely as from next year, where we will be incorporating a specific compartment in the European Innovation Council, not only with public money, but also with private money. So this is a pool of public and private money, here again to accompany the growth stage of the companies and to give you a signal in a crowding-in approach. I should mention that we have also in the pipe the preparation of the so-called 28 regime, so which is not to have an additional regime on the top, but is really to find the way towards a pan-European pan-European status that will be really easier and faster for any companies that want to relocate, and grow in the EU. And the last sentence that maybe in the room you do not see well was something that was said by Gerhard in the introduction. It was not deemed to be a comparative analysis with the US. It was not to be back-to-back. It was deemed to demonstrate very quickly where we are, grossly speaking. It is the first presentation. What is our ambition and how we can make it in the transatlantic dynamic and find a mutual benefit between EU, US, the community in the Silicon Valley, and our portfolio of companies in the EU. But it will be for the panel to discuss it. And I would like to thank you for your attention, and I give back the floor to Joanna. Thank you.
Woo! Thank you so much, François. I would like to invite our panelists to the front. Constantine Panorania, Gillian. Constantine, if you could take a seat here. Gillian Manus, next to Constantine. Alberto, and Stephen. I'll present you properly in a moment. We're going to start. Thank you so much, François, for giving us a lot of food for thought. We're going to start the panel discussion right now, and just a little bit of explanations how it's going to work. So we're going to start now. We're going to run for an hour, and then we're going to have time for questions and answers. So prepare your questions. And at 10:15, there might be a citywide drill by the earthquake up. So your phones might go off. You know, there might be a big noise. So let's not freak out, because it's for our safety. So I'm Joanna. I'm the deputy at the EU office in San Francisco. And by the way, we have more. We have more chairs in front if people want to come and sit. It's going to be a fascinating panel. So just, yeah, even the speaker seats can be taken. Absolutely. Please come to the front. Please come to the front and let me, sorry? So, come on up. And I'm going to start talking. Europe is far away and sometimes complex for you as businessmen, businesswomen, and investors alike. And we often hear that it is too difficult to do business or invest in Europe. That setting up a company takes months instead of days, and then it costs too much, and that Europe overregulates. I would like us to try and clear things up a little bit during this panel. As we have just seen during François' presentation, Europe has top research and innovation and all the conditions for exploiting this growth, and employment have improved quite significantly over the past years. On top of this, we have major investment efforts by the EU, planned and already happening. We're reinforcing defense and security. We're investing in AI infrastructure by investing in AI factories and gigafactories. We have a stable policy framework and predictable for businesses and new initiatives. So is it time to rediscover Europe? Is it time for the road from Europe to Silicon Valley to be a two-way street instead of a one-way street? Let's explore this vision of an innovation partnership. Europe and Silicon Valley investing in each other's innovations for mutual benefit. So it is my greatest pleasure to introduce finally our panel of esteemed speakers who will help us unpack these questions during our panel. Let me start with Prince Constantine van Oranje. I have it here. We will get you, yes. This one. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Constantine, for extending your trip to stay with us for another day, half a day, to be one of our panelists at this event. We appreciate it a lot, and it's going to be a fantastic discussion. Let me introduce Constantine to you, if Constantine needs an introduction. He leads TechLeap. He's a special tech envoy. And TechLeap is the initiative to turn the Netherlands into a European powerhouse for tech companies. Nothing less. He and his team run programs and connect a community of the most promising and ambitious startup and scale-up founders in the Netherlands. TechLeap also works with stakeholders like the government to improve the conditions for tech entrepreneurs to scale their companies, and so much more that I will let Constantine to delve on later on. Alberto Yepes, who is a co-founder and managing director at ForgePoint Capital. Alberto is a serial entrepreneur, not a killer, with a proven track record of building global businesses and leading them to successful exits. He is considered one of the pioneers of the cybersecurity industry and one of the most influential global investors in the sector, with a notable experience in Europe and here. Now, Gillian Manus. Gillian has so many hats. Gillian is a US venture advisor to the European Innovation Council, or as European Innovation Council likes to call her, an EIC ambassador, because she is the one who knows EIC here in San Francisco best. Maybe not as well as François, but François works there and she does it, okay? Gillian is a managing partner of an early stage Silicon Valley venture fund, Structure Capital, as well, and so many other things. Not other things, but she has many other hats, as I said. But I want to single out something that is extremely important for Europe. She made it one of her priorities to help in deployment of capital to dual-use technology, as the EU Commission has allocated 800 billion euros to rearm Europe. She was named as one of top 25 early-stage female investors by Business Insider. She has also held leadership positions in the media industry. She is on the board of Stanford University School of Medicine, Board of Fellows. She's also on the board of NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center, and so on. And above all, Gillian considers herself an innovation diplomat, and we will come back to that. So her mission is to reduce conflict and deepen alliances between countries by fostering investment into global innovation engines. All the things that are so relevant in today's world and at this event. And Stephen Jacobs, whom we met recently, and immediately we put him on a panel of Brussels to the Bay event. He's the founding partner of Drumbeat Capital, where his mission is to be the best strategic thought partner to seed stage deep tech founders in both the US and Europe. At the Drumbeat Capital, he provides deep tech founders with a transatlantic bridge, accelerating access to customers, capital, talent, and industrial bases across continents. Let me finish that introduction and move immediately to the first round of questions. So we've heard from Gerard and François that the perception on Europe that used to be that Europe is a fragmented, bureaucratic, and overregulated continent is shifting. So let me start with you, Constantine. Can I get a mic? You've been here touring Silicon Valley and San Francisco with 23 founders. You are a champion of a Dutch startup and scale-up ecosystem. You're doing so much also for Europe. So I would like to ask you, actually, this morning when preparing, I was reading your reflections on your trip, and there are two things that struck me most. What you've shared that Art de Heus from Synopsys said, that his advice is to run the fastest if you want to win, with those who run the fastest. And they'll be unpleasant, he said, always demanding more, cheaper, faster, and better. But it forces you to up your game. I think we can run pretty fast in Europe, but there are still obstacles that we have there. And what he also said, what Art also said, is that what's holding companies back in Europe is not having a unified market. So is this the key to unlock European innovation? To help founders run faster? Could you share with us your reflections on your stay in this last week here?
Yes, thank you. Well, I have a kind of an allergy against this internal market speak, because it's always been, and Gerard knows this, this was this one sentence: we have to fully exploit the potential of the internal market. And well, we know that that's a very good intention. It simply doesn't work because it's always ex post. So to make an internal market, you first have to have a disruption of the internal market, which you then can fix. So the good thing that we saw now, this 28th regime, or EU Inc., is for the first time you can it's proactively looking for a solution that might actually work, might give a company a regulatory framework that is actually unified across boundaries. So if that works, that's definitely a big a bonus for Europe. The point made by Art de Geus from Synopsys, which actually was to these founders, was go and find in your industry, wherever in your value chain, some of those players that go fastest, and keep up with them, or try to beat them. And as he added, this is the semiconductor industry, so it's not the easiest, but and it'll be very painful. But it's the only way to be the most competitive company in space. And there, I think in Europe, we we are lagging a bit because we don't have that kind of density of companies like you have here. So, and the density of VC, there's that competition which is driving companies here in the Valley, competition for talent, competition for customers, competition for money, maybe less competition for money than in Europe. So there's much less of that scarcity in terms of capital. It's actually quite wasteful capital, but the wastefulness of capital does allow new technology booms to go much faster. And in Europe, we're very frugal. We're try to be very capital efficient, and that's not very good if you have a new technology, because nobody has the right risk metrics and the right understanding or the pattern recognition that they are requiring to actually step into a new technology. So a boom like we're seeing now in AI is very unlikely to happen in Europe. It only happens when we see it happening in the US. Then people start waking up and said, oh, we also have to start throwing capital at companies. It's always going to be less, and the companies are also not as kind of adapted to that. I mean, they're also much more frugal. They will ask less money. So it's hard to compare these two systems, but it's always good to at least come together and see what we can do much better, because maybe take back to when I'm at home in the Netherlands. It's very hard to take this kind of this dynamics here in Silicon Valley and take that home to Amsterdam. We have a lot of good companies, we have good universities. There's also significant capital. A lot of the US capital is actually flowing into the Netherlands, so that's not the main problem. But there's just much less of that urgency, much less of that drive, and this place on Earth has been able to capture the global talent and the most ambitious talent, not only technical talent but also business talent that like other places just haven't been able to do. And that kind of density and that kind of drive is very hard to replicate.
Absolutely. Speaking of the throwing capital at technology, we can read also in today's Financial Times, there's an interesting article about AI bubble. When we think about AI bubble and when we hear bubble, we think negative. But what you just said is that we need more money to be thrown at those technologies to then benefit the whole ecosystems. I know it's not one-sided, but we're going to come back to the funding gap when we speak about the role of different actors in it. But I would like to stay a little bit, because we're at the beginning of the conversation, to keep it structured. And I would like to ask you, Gillian, about your perspectives on Europe, to build on my question of what Europe does well and what Europe could do better.
Yeah. I just want to make one point in terms of AI and the investment into AI, because yes, you have these AI factories and you have tremendous amount of prioritization in Europe, as it should be really all over the world in terms of AI. But there's also these, I would say, burdensome fees that are instituted because of the AI Act, which I have nothing against the AI Act. I think it serves a lot of purposes, but a lot of the SMEs have to pay anywhere from 400,000 to up to $1 million in terms of fee for compliancy, and it takes sometimes 12 months. So that's going to put a really big sort of break on a lot of the ability of these companies to be able to go fast, if in fact we're talking about speed at all. And so there's definitely, on one hand, there's the more capital being raised. You have the 5 billion scale up fund, which I have 2 ways to look at that. But it's not about just capital. And the one thing that I worry about all the time is that you can't just compare Europe to the EU, because that is not apples to apples. There are strengths in each one of them. There's a complexity in each one of them. We have definitely challenges here in the US, but one. Oh, we're drilling.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Is everybody drilling? Okay. When you stop, does that mean we have to do something? Is there an action here?
Yeah, I know why there's a drill, because they don't know where you're getting your fees data from.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I've done my homework, and so I work with a lot of legal teams around this. And in fact, I'm probably doing a piece on this in Bloomberg, but that's beside the point. So listen, what Europe does well is it has tremendous minds, it has tremendous talent, it has tremendous researchers, it definitely has the will, it has unique properties, it has legacy companies, it has manufacturing and all the different capabilities that we actually don't already have here in the United States. And so we need each other. We need each other. And I think that's part of it. But we should be focusing on our strengths instead of our weaknesses in terms of finding when I work with this administration here in the United States, I talk about a workaround. You know, where can we find common ground where we can help each other? And I think that's a lot of this. One of the gaps in Europe, it's not just this capital gap. I talk a lot about the education gap. Mm-hmm. We have 70% more entrepreneurial programs here in universities in the United States than in Europe. But then you have in the Netherlands, and Constantine, your programs invest a lot and work a lot in terms of entrepreneurial and operational excellence and just knowledge. And I think that's one of the very big missing pieces in Europe, is that you don't have this education of entrepreneurialism, of getting funders who actually used to be founders. I mean, that's something that we have here. And so I believe that it's not just capital, it's not just regulatory fragmentation, it is an education gap around entrepreneurialism. And I think that's something that I would like to see the EIC, and I'd like to see everyone invest more into, make that a priority. The other one point is that we solve here in Europe, here in the United States, we qualify problems and we find solutions to those problems in a very intentional way. I teach at Stanford Business School, and we run classes on just qualifying the problems to then solve, and those then become fundable and find partners, enterprise partners, solving their problems, solving government problems. We need better procurement infrastructure in Europe. That's another gap. That's another, and I hate to use the word weakness, because weakness, you can gain strength from weakness, from failures. In United States, we see failure as actually a plus. I invest in a lot of founders who have failed, particularly who have failed because they know what not to do. They've made mistakes, okay? If you do not try something, that's a failure in my estimation. In Europe, that's part of this. So try, qualify problems, institute educational excellence around entrepreneurialism. It's not just capital, it's more than that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I wanted to respond to that. I wouldn't be the deputy of the EU office if I didn't. But I love that, having best friends on the panel gets you a friendly advice. So I take it, Gillian. But when you started talking about fees, I thought you were referring to the AI factories fees, where I want everyone to know that there are no fees for startups and researchers to access the compute that we will have at AI factories. Now, when it comes to compliance with the EU AI Act, I think now is a very good moment to feed into the consultation on the simplification efforts that are going on. If these figures are well grounded, which I believe because I know you. Yeah. So let's do that. Let's share those data with the European Commission. The consultation is ongoing, but I am very surprised by that because the AI Act is not applying yet, and it's one set of rules, and the smallest companies are exempted. And Constantine wants to come in on that.
What I just want to say, we don't have to be like defensive about this. Just what would be really good, not to have consultations and people telling what how things need to change. You go through a whole cycle of legislation again, but to have the Commission itself be a learning organization, and also the EIC. We've been trying to push the EIC to reduce the bureaucracy, time to market, reduce the due diligence, because there's double due diligence. There's reporting that is required from companies on top of the reporting they're already doing to their investors, and it's just ridiculous. And there are things on the state aid rules, like this organization in distress. You basically companies that of course are still growth companies. They have no revenues, and of course they are financially not that strong in the traditional sense. But that's why you've got venture capital. And it takes ages for the Commission to take something which everybody agrees on and implement it. So I think there is so much you can do to become a much better engine for innovation than through the long cycles of consultations. And I know there's so many good people there and they all want this, but somehow we find it really hard to cut through the red tape. And it's, it could be driven from the top as well.
Thank you for contributing to that. As I'm part of the European Commission, I'm not going to keep on defending it, but it's an institution. I've been there. I didn't mention that. Constantine was in Nelly Cruz's cabinet, one of the European commissioners before. But obviously, the European Commission cannot do everything. So member states have to step in as well. And when we speak about overregulation, it's a lot about fragmentation. It's a lot about the different rules that are in the different countries. So let me move to our other two panelists so that they can also get a voice in this debate. And please feel free, Alberto and then Stephen, to chime in on this topic. But I would like us to move a little bit towards this paradigm shift when it comes to US investors investing in Europe. So Alberto, you're considered one of the pioneers in cybersecurity industry and you invest globally. There seems a need for a paradigm shift among US investors from investing in Europe and relocating to the US to invest and grow companies in Europe. And I think you have something valuable to say on that. From the perspective of a Silicon Valley investor, do you see more confidence or growing confidence in scaling startups from Europe and in Europe without relocating them here? Is there a belief and evidence maybe that one can successfully grow startups in Europe while supporting their access to the US and other markets?
Well, thank you, Jan, and thank you for inviting me to the panel. What I want to provide is a perspective of the, someone that has not been close to regulatory environments and never have raised a penny from public pension plans. I see a big shift in Europe to try to support the ecosystem and command that, but let's leave that as a separate item. Just for those of you that don't know, ForgePoint is a venture capital firm exclusively focused on investing in early stage companies and select growth in the convergence of cybersecurity, AI, and infrastructure. We have raised 3 funds in the US, and we manage more than $1 billion on assets under management. And we're in the process of raising our European fund, which would be a $400 million fund, investing with the same strategy, but if effectively to keep European companies growing in the state and really, and I'll tell you a bit more about this strategy. And we have raised in combination with a group, a financial group called Grupo Santander, who is actually a global fund, a global financial institution, and their goal is to actually increase innovation in Europe, and they want to be able to use technologies that are built in Europe, scale in Europe, to be able to operate globally. They have very little presence in the US, so it's an ideal partner to have. Just to give you a perspective, we are very mission focused, so we believe that greater cybersecurity will increase economic prosperity and will bring down barriers. Our differentiation is building an ecosystem of advisors that can help us be better in investment, and we bring people from the industry, many chief information security officers, CIOs, chief digital officers, AI officers, to help us ground our investment, but also have very good relationships with governments in the intelligence community, because as you may imagine, cybersecurity and defense requires their perspective. We don't necessarily invest in offensive technologies, but we always try to figure out what can we do in order to make the world a better place. Just to give credibility on what I'm saying, I'm just not talking statistically, we've been investing in Europe for the past 15 years. In the last 12 months, we made 6 investments. And you know, all the things that you're talking about, just to provide credibility and all the statistics that you have. We invested in a company called Multiverse, which raised $217 million, and it was a combination of Bullhound, Santander, HP, and the Spanish fund SET, right, which is the one that drives the digital transformation. We invested in another company in Spain called Maisa, which is AI security, but we did it with Creandum in the Nordics. So you need to create an ecosystem. It's not, investing is a team sport. Everybody thinks that we need to be, you know, it has to be my ideal. If we have Creandum as a partner, we'll create a great European-based company, and where we have that more evidence. We invested in a company called Kevlar, which is also in a French company that is actually leading in the whole SOC automation world, and we're doing it with EQT. So it's not like we're exclusively trying to come in sharp elbow, this is my deal. We find who the right partners to work with so that we can help the entrepreneur teams grow in their environment. And in the past, and obviously talking about universities being a great source for spin-outs. We have 2 that are been very successful for us. We spun out a company called LinksTech out of the University of Madrid, Autónoma de Madrid, and it was doing real-time fraud detection, and we took that team, and it's only operating outside the US. The whole operation of being a global company is not only working throughout Europe and all Latin America, and it was a co-investment, obviously, with Grupo Santander. We also co-invested in the spin-out out of in Lulia called BehaviorSec, and we invested with many of the Nordic countries, and basically that company got acquired by LexisNexis, and it did not operate in the US, it stayed in Europe. So I have a lot of street smarts in terms of having done these, never paid attention to the regulatory environment. I tried to make sure that we change it. What I've seen, the changes that have happened in the last 15 years is, I think there's more willingness I guess out of necessity, for governments to pay attention and try to help the innovation. I'm very happy to be participating in this panel, but still the regulatory environment is very, very heavy. For us to launch our fund, our Luxembourg fund, it took us almost a year. We needed to spend more than $1 million to set it up. The only people that made money were the lawyers. And, you know, but we believe, and we're doing it, but believe me, it's still not an easy way to do it. I remember our first investment was a company in Spain called Alien Vault that, you know, it was an open source company that we brought them to the US because the Spanish ecosystem wasn't willing to support them. But trying to re-domesticate Alien Vault to the US became a big issue with the Spanish government, because as soon as we put in the valuation of the company, at a certain multiple, the entrepreneur wanted to be taxed. The government wanted to tax them. So we worked with the Spanish government to change the policy that that's not equity, it's only equity, it's not money that need to do that. So we've been try to be an value-added partner to many of the European groups, because we've been investing in several places. But the tendency has been, I need to leave Europe because I need to be successful, and the only place where they're going to pay attention to me is going to be the US. And that's what happened with Alienable. We did the Series A, and then B, C, and D were done in the US, got acquired by AT&T, a company in Croatia, amazing Croatian entrepreneurs doing a lot of great technologies and reverse engineering for preventing software attacks. The first thing the co-founder says, we need to go to the US because no European companies are willing to buy our technology. So in addition to regulation, in addition to creating funding, in addition to provide capability, I think the big missing piece is trying to bring the corporates in Europe, not only to help invest in companies, yet invest in funds and try to create I think the three-legged stool besides money, university and all that has to be the corporates. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been in that side, and if the company, if a Santander prefers to buy technology from the US and not from Europe, I have a problem. So I need to go to the US. the whole idea, and when we're working with these European entrepreneurs, is saying we're going to go to the Champions League, but we're not going to go to the US immediately. It's too expensive. A sales team costs you, a good sales leader is almost $500,000, and with this technology person is $1 million. We don't need to go there. There's too much competition. Let's stay within it. But what's going to allow us to stay is to get the corporates, the financial institutions, the manufacturing companies, the space companies to embrace the local innovation and make them grow. Because at the end of the day, as you grow, you get more money, you get more valuation. Eventually, you go become a listed company, or you get acquired. But the only way to get to the Champions Leagues is not coming to the US. Israel has to do it because they don't have an ecosystem. There's no big companies in Israel, and that's why every Israeli company, the first thing they do is come to the US. In Europe, come on, we have global companies, but they don't want to trust their own people. For me, it's like, wow. So what we've done is build a relationship with the large corporates to make sure that they validate and say, if we invest in this company, will you support them? Yeah. And also bring co-investors from the US to stay there and try to add that DNA, which is more a cultural thing of risk-taking, and failure is okay. But at the same time, given our experience in the model, the way we do it is try to prevent them making the mistakes that we made early. So there's a lot of lessons learned that we had. I'm very excited to be engaged with the European Innovation Council, and my team is very committed to do that. So we have a team in Europe actively investing, and I know, Jill, you wanted to say something.
But you were hitting upon one, sorry, Steve, I'm just going to say it's really fast, but I'm just saying that in the United States, and this is very Mark Benioff, always said that every company needs an anchor partner, a lighthouse partner to help design a design partner, an investment partner. So corporates are not, and corporates here say to companies, here's our problems. You create the solution. And in military here, it's called demand signals. What are the demand signals that society has? And so corporations invest in companies here, help build the companies here, and then are become obviously the first customer, validate, as you say, and then scale. So it's a very critical differentiator between how we, okay, anyway, Steve, you're figuring that. Okay.
Thank you. Stephen, I'd like to ask you for your perspective from the point of view, you track early stage innovations in the US and in the EU. So I'd like to ask you for two things, your perspective on Europe, how it's been changing, what we've been discussing, but also maybe to build on the point strongly raised on the role of corporates. What can we do on the side, on the policymaker side, or on anyone to make corporates realize that? That might be more a question to Alberto, but let's start with your perspective. You've been waiting for too long on how Europe is changing.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Steve. I think my fund invests at seed stage for deep tech companies, half in the US and half in Europe. So what we're focused on is when research is done being research, someone says, I want to make a product from a technology, and then I want to create a business from that product. So that's a pipeline that you have to go through if you have some really interesting breakthrough. It could be in cybersecurity, automotive, whatever industry. ASML is a great example in Europe of a company who did this in the silicon kind of infrastructure business tools, picks and shovels. To answer your question about what is different or changing in Europe, and I want to like move away from the policy conversation, regardless of our host's recollection. I think at the end of the day, Europe has always been excellent at industry, right? If you look back hundreds or thousands of years, like previous industrial revolutions were led by Europe, right? The US was doing to Europe what the US complains about China doing to the US, right? We were draining people out of the textile industry, out of the automotive industry, out of the aerospace industry to help build those industries in the US because it was critical for our survival. Same as, slightly different tactics, but similar to what we're seeing elsewhere in the world today. The genesis of a lot of this expertise was actually found in Europe. And that's really important because it built a culture. It built a culture in academia. It built a culture in research institutes. It built a culture in corporates and in banking to foster excellent companies. In Germany, they're called the Mittelstand, right? Billion-dollar revenue companies owned by families for 50, 100, 200 years, to build world-class products that even today, like there's one company in Germany that builds all the tips for ballpoint pens because no one else can figure out how to do it. If anyone here likes to ski, all of your chairlifts are built by one Austrian company, right? Like exceptional expertise in very specific areas that are utilized all over the world, including the US and China. Now, why is that important? I think the last 20 to 25 years, we've been on this S-curve of software build-out. It's been this incredible opportunity for prosperity, kind of building tools that didn't exist before, using software, using interconnected, kind of the internet. And that didn't necessarily mesh well with what Europe was good at. It didn't, like the whole attitude was, well, you can over-the-air update, fix something that doesn't go right in software. So just push it out quickly. See what people do with it. See how they respond, learn from that, and then update it. And that's a very fast iteration cycle that allows for things to break, right? The whole Facebook mantra, move fast, break things, because it made sense for software. You can't do that with a car. None of us want to drive a car that's like, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, right? Like that doesn't fly in the physical world of industry. So this muscle that had been built in Europe around how do you build the best companies in the world in industry didn't translate to software. And so the analogy I use is like Microsoft missed mobile, Europe kind of missed software in a lot of parts. And that's unfortunate, right? That's not to say there aren't smart people in Europe. A third of all top technical universities for software engineering are in Europe. A third are in the US, a third are in China, the balance is the rest of the world. 40% of top technical research is in Europe. 40% in the US. It's not a lack of people. Human beings have the same brains all over the planet. It's not a lack of education. It's not a lack of research opportunity. It's not even really a lack of capital in the early stages of creating a business. It's definitely not a lack of expertise in industry. I focus on deep tech. I don't invest in software. Historically, it's been a lack of cultural fit. It's been a lack of celebration of the mentality of try it out. If it doesn't work, you'll learn from it. Right? Failure is a function of taking risk. Success is also a function of taking risk. Mediocrity is the thing you get when you don't take risk. And that's not going to move the world forward. So how do we take the appropriate risks with safety nets in the case of failure and celebrations in the case of success? In Germany, both those things kind of didn't jive. That is changing. It will change over time. I'm confident the European Union will adjust to this new paradigm. It takes time. I think we all know that. Every country is going to regulate as they do. Like no good founder is really focused on that, right? Of course, they will advocate for their best interests. They're going to build regardless, right? They're going to say, screw it, I'm going ahead anyway, because I want to make this vision of mine a reality. And so what we're focused on is let's find those outliers, which are born all over the world in equal percentages. Let's make sure they have access to the inspiration they need to found exceptional companies, which, again, to use Konstantin's word, which is my favorite word, density is what is unique about Silicon Valley. You have extremely high density of these types of individuals and thinkers because they come here from all over the place. And so they inspire each other. With social media and access to Twitter and other things, like you can actually get that inspiration now remotely. So there is a dispersion of this like inspirational content, allowing someone in Freiburg, Germany to watch Elon Musk say a thing and say, you know what? I feel like I could do that too. That actually happened in Munich.
You don't want people.
Fraunhofer actually has an exceptional research institute, and Constellar was from there. Anyway, in Munich, there was a team at Technical University of Munich who saw Elon Musk talk about Hyperloop and was like, we can do this out of Munich. Like Munich, it's center of the world for a lot of like automotive engineering excellence and stuff. And they built a Hyperloop and they won. And Elon Musk said, the best Hyperloop I've seen anywhere in the world is this team in Munich. And then they said, you know what, let's think bigger. And they decided to make a rocket engine. And they said, this rocket engine, we think, can be as performant as any rocket engine anywhere in the world. And it turned out to be true, so much so that they now founded a competitor to SpaceX called Isar Aerospace, based in Munich in Germany, all because they saw inspirational content from Elon Musk and they saw a competition he was sponsoring, and he doesn't care where the technology comes from. I'm not for or against Elon Musk. That's not the point of my conversation here. It's just to say we're seeing these outliers all throughout Europe being inspired by global content, building companies that can have a global impact, using the strengths of Europe, which are significant, and compensating for the weakness through access to new technologies, which mostly is culture, celebration of failure, feeling like you can do it, seeing someone else do something crazy and being like, I guess I can do crazy things, and starting to do crazy things, right? That is happening now. Now, where is the gap? Sorry, guys. I'm taking a little bit of my time. I hope that's okay with you all. So the gap. The thing that we need to fix is, actually, I think EIC has done an exceptional job of planting seeds, right? Seed stage, right? Like planting a bunch of seeds all throughout Europe. You saw it. There's more startups in Europe than in the US. That's great. The quality isn't the same. The distribution of excellent outcomes are unlikely to be the same for a whole host of reasons. But that's not the point. The point is Europe took a risk. They did the thing we're complaining about. They said, we're going to give a bunch of people a shot, and some of them will succeed, right? Hopefully 1 or 2% of them succeed. Now, the next stage they also invested in as well, which is early stage venture funds. Let's give a bunch of them capital. They're not all going to be good, but some of them might be. And then we'll start to build this industry of risk-taking capital within Europe. Wonderful thing to do. Now we're at the next stage of that journey, which is if you're an early stage successful deep tech founder and you've raised your seed money and capital in Europe and things are actually working, what do you do next? And if you talk to any deep tech founder in Europe and anyone here who is one or has talked to one, you've heard the same story I have, is we need access to both the big industrial superpowers of the West. We need access to both Europe and the US because they have different strengths, they're complementary. We cannot be a global champion if we're not accessing both. And if we're not a global champion, we will lose to a global champion. Sorry, my throat's very dry. So European founders need capital and customers in the US. I'll get to the water. I'm almost done, trust me. European founders need access to.
Right.
Thank you. Wow.
Entrepreneurship, taking risks.
Supported by a prince. I'm blushing, actually. Thank you very much, Konstantin. So European founders need capital and customers in the US. We will build growth capital in Europe, and that will be a wonderful thing, and that will return the benefits to the European investors and community. Again, fully supportive. That's going to take time. You don't want the great founders today to die while we wait for something that'll take 5, 10, 15 years. So those people need to get plugged into the beating heart of Silicon Valley. Right now, unfortunately, most folks in Europe don't have those networks. So it's a gap that founders are faced with. American founders want access to the talent, the industrial base, and the governments of Europe. Very short story. Varda, top space tech company here in the US, got a call from them. Hey, we're raising a round, way oversubscribed, all the best investors, Khosla, Peter Thiel, Lux Capital, General Catalyst, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have the connective tissue to the customers and the suppliers we need in Europe. Our number one customer is US DoD. Customers 2 through 10 are all European governments. None of our investors, none of our team members really have deep networks there. Can you help us? And so they were looking for us to join the cap table and kind of my relationship with Jillian in particular, just to help them have connective tissue into Europe because it's critical. I was just down in LA meeting with companies making hypersonic missiles for the US, as America baby as it gets, right? They can only serve the American market. All of their equipment comes from Europe, right? Like you cannot make the best products in the world without taking the best of both industrial superpowers of the West. So what are we going to do about it? We're going to build that bridge in conjunction with everyone else, hopefully in this room, between connecting the best early stage deep tech founders in the US and Europe and kind of giving them that leg up on being a global champion. And that will attract the best capital, not only from the US, but globally, because everyone wants to invest in global champions. Nobody wants to invest in a local regional winner. It is irrelevant to the global market. So for Europe to have a real say on the global stage, it needs global champions that can push their weight around. America has power because of Google, right? Because of Microsoft and Facebook. That gives them clout on the global stage.
Thank you so much.
There needs to be an answer. All right, monologue over.
Thank you. That was actually great. Thank you so much, Stephen, and I appreciate so much of what you're saying, and I hope this is giving us a fuller picture of we don't just need more capital for the growth stage, but we need more networks. We need the connected tissue. I like that that expression. And that's what you're doing. And dare I say, that's what the EIC ambition is to do too, to connect the best founders, the best entrepreneurs with capital, with knowledge, to bring more knowledge, to give them this exposure also to the US. But not only, EIC has a strategy to help them get more international, more global. And if they want to get global, they have to go through the US. What you said about dual use is a good segue to what I wanted to ask the panelists when it comes to defense and security and how we can help Europe to deploy those funds and to grow their defense tech companies. Do we want to start with you, Gillian?
I'll try to be fast. So I actually come out of the intelligence community. So I've been doing this for decades, since I was actually 18 years old. And I've worked on national security in a number of different roles. What's happening in Europe right now is causing a sense of urgency. Clearly, we know this. And I look at the amount of capital that they're allocating to this, whether it's 888, whatever it is, billions into intentionally investing into dual use technology, if and when Parliament and some of the governing bodies are able to actually say they're going to invest. And they are because Van der Leyen, she is, but it is, I mean, in Germany right now, you can't set up a defense bank. You can't account for a defense company. There are some big hurdles, and yet, there's obviously the will to do this, and the capital is being allocated. What I have recommended and what I'm going to continue to champion is what I'm calling a catalog of capabilities. Because the problem in Europe, one of the biggest problems, is that the VCs, we do not know what Europe's capabilities are. We do not know. In the EIC has hundreds and hundreds of companies. Which one of those can be applied to defense? Which one has military applications? And I'm not talking about just bombs and bullets. I was in Kyiv and I was talking to the mayor and everyone there, and I'm saying, what do you need? And of course, autonomous drones, and there's a lot of capabilities, but they're also saying prosthetics. And we're looking at bioterrorism, and we're looking at all the different areas where dual use, it's sensors, it's satellites, it's obviously cybersecurity, but it's across a large spectrum. Europe has a lot of these companies that have been invested billions over years into. It's just that we in the US and globally don't know what you have. And if in fact the EIF can tell their portfolio company, their funds, to ask their portfolio companies to basically to explain what they have that might have it might have military application. I've worked in a lot of countries right now. I was in Israel, I've been in Japan, I've been in South Korea, I've been in India, I've been all over. And I've told them that this is what everyone needs to do. It's a catalog of capabilities, it's taking inventory of what Europe has already have, which is a lot. And how can we now, the investors, then identify and intentionally invest and help this defense and security infrastructure and investment system strengthen. And I think that this is the way to do it. So it's called a catalog of capabilities.
Thank you. I think this is great to have concrete recommendations. And we have many consuls general, many representatives of European countries, governments here. I think it's a great takeaway to take home, and probably easy to do with a keyword search and talking to those companies. Konstantin.
Yeah, here we don't kind of fully agree. I think because there's a lot of supply. So venture capital in this space is not a really, so in the US it's working because you also have the demand side. So we're talking a bit about companies. This is a very specific industry where you have a few primes, huge companies. They are not so used to work with startups. Startups are not so used to work with these companies. You need to be deeply embedded. You need to be deeply embedded also in the defense ecosystem. And the government needs to, and so all these MODs need to be open for innovation. And they, at least in Europe, I don't know how it's in the US, are not very sophisticated procurers of innovation. So really they come from 20 years of cost cutting and trying to survive now to suddenly abundance of capital, and they have no clue how to really spend it. They don't even know what kind of war they're fighting. So it's very hard to, so you can have all the supply of capabilities, but it's also how the demand is articulated. Many of these companies don't even know, they don't even get into collaborating or co-creating with the militaries that they would be selling to. So that is a massive challenge. I mean, we build drones and then they go to the Ukraine and they'll never fly an inch. So you have to test there, and you have to kind of very kind of rapid innovation loops that we don't have in our military. We still have a military structure with 4 layers of generals and how many layers of colonels and all that, all basically based from the Napoleonic times, that you were one flag away, or you basically would signal each other with drums. You really don't need that kind of hierarchy if you want to innovate. It has to be super flat, it has to be super fast, and that's not what we're good at. So it is. So we are the NATO Innovation Fund. I'm on the board there, and we see no challenge in terms of supply of good ideas, of good companies. We have incredible deal flow, and we were initially we were doubtful of that, but it's really been a market creator. 1 billion euro does get a lot of entrepreneurs very creative about how their application can actually become dual use. But on the demand side, we don't know how that's being procured. We don't know what kind of exits these companies will get. So the return of the fund is still a big question mark. And that's something we need to solve in Europe.
Just a question on that, because this was also the case here in the US before DIU was created, right?
Yeah.
This procurement was so difficult. And DOD was basically, and still is, this very...
I think InQtel, only about 20% of InQtel companies are actually delivering to the MOD, whereas in the UK, NSIF has 45%. So actually, the UK has been able to crack the nut better than the US in that sense. So there are good examples. I think Estonia is an incredible example. They feel the urgency. It's a very resilient country. The whole country, basically, the whole economy is actually, and supporting Ukraine. So there they also do a good job. So there are good examples, but not yet at a European.
Last question before I pass the mic to Alberto. No. Can I ask you if you had any conversations with the Dutch government about this, and what is their reaction, on procurement, on how to, I'm asking about the Dutch government, naturally. What is the reaction? I mean, this is something that is not coming from the sky. Like they hear about this, that the problem lays on the demand side.
No, I mean, this is the first time that I've been in innovation and technology for quite a while, but it's the first time that I feel that there is a real, true pull from the public sector. Mm-hmm. So we're doing startups because people say, like, this panel is really important, you do startups. That doesn't mean that that we really need them. I mean, who cares if the Netherlands has a robotics sector? But yeah, we think it's cool to have robotic startups, and we say, okay, they will create jobs, and we have to stay on top of innovation, and our economy needs to be resilient. It's all nice and good, but they don't really need us. If I talk to Ministry of Economic Affairs, they're not procuring from our companies. We find it really hard to get our Ministry of Health to procure health innovations from startups.
I mean, Ministry of Defense.
Yeah, but now we're talking, the first time now, we see the ministry is actually eager to buy innovation, but they don't know how to do it because they haven't done it. So, and it's really hard to do it well.
Tell them about DIU.
Sorry?
Tell them about DIU here.
Yeah, but I mean, also here, building for a war is, this thing is like not very stable. But so in a war situation, we now know how to, what the Ukraine needs. We need what our forces need. That is quite clearly defined. Still, iterations are really fast. But we don't know when the war stops. What are we going to do with a stock of drones? We can't have many warehouses of drones because you can't stock them. It's different than a missile. So all that innovation needs to kind of continue somehow. We have to build the resilience that once there is a threat, we can actually deploy it. So then we tell the companies, but you have to become dual use. So we're telling all our other startups, be focused, focus, focus. And we're telling these companies, you have to build redundancy, you have to be dual use, because at some point, we as a government are not going to procure from you anymore because we don't need you, because we don't need any excess drones. So we are telling these companies to actually build the resilience and the redundancy. And I think that's actually the role of government. The government should be able to do that, because I'll tell you, if the war in Ukraine stops, a lot of companies are going to go broke. And that whole industry might actually be wiped out.
Yeah. Power of a moderator to pass the mic to Stephen.
Sorry, I'll be very short. I also don't want to lose the connection between defense and dual use. right? The beauty of dual use is that 99.9% of the value created by DARPA and kind of US ministries of defense has been used for civilian applications, right? GPS, the internet, communications, computing systems, data center infrastructure, like all this stuff was used initially by the military, but then distributed, which helps the innovation cycle continue and the military benefits from that. That's going to be true in Europe as well. So like, if you're just developing bombs or bullets, of course, there's one customer for that, right? But if you're developing, again, back to selfishly like deep technology, like technologies that are going to fundamentally change both civilian and government landscapes, like you're going to have multiple markets, and your biggest market isn't going to be defense all the time. Yeah. In times of war, of course, that's a huge market. There's a very active push, but hopefully we're not at war all the time. That would be a great reality for all of us. So like, let's focus on the technologies that also have massive civilian applications.
Can we get perspective?
You don't want to be dependent on government contracts.
From Albert.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
No, this is
Yeah, you want to.
You
wanted the floor,
What I wanted to add is we have the same problem in the US, Constantine. Don't be fooled because we have DIU and we have In-Q-Tel that we solve the problem. We discourage our companies to do business with the government, okay? Why? Because they need to be ready. If you're going to sell technology to the government and you have a scale company that is able to support and be able to absorb by the primes. And so it's not easy. We've been co-investing with In-Q-Tel for the past 15, 20 years. One of my partners was the chief operating officer of DIUX with Rash. It was Ernie Bio, and he was the first one to be able to allocate some of the monies. But it's still very, very difficult to actually sell to the government. So I take the point that since it's dual use, focus on the commercial side and then go into government. So let me repeat again, we discourage our companies to go and work with the government. We have, one of our investors is Karasoft, which is one of the largest distributors in the public sector that sell more than $22 billion into the public sector, not just DOD, Intel, all the agencies. Even having them as a strategic partner, we're very careful of which companies should be going into, despite the demand, and making sure that they're actually ready to do business with the government. It's very, very difficult. The other thing that I'd like to add is, for the first time, I see a change in the whole Department of Defense and in the US government, shifting the primes to become secondary to technology companies. As much as the noise that we keep on hearing from the current administration, they have pushed, and I know that by fact, they're asking our portfolio companies to be primes and get the primes to be subprimes, because they said the focus on getting the primes, and they dominate the market, and they have a business model that is butts and seats in time, whereas the technology takes a secondary role, and then we never get the amount of money. So therefore, I think I'm very hopeful, because of the current administration, not the prior ones, because we have been living it, that actually we'll see more changes in procurement now than ever before. So I don't know, Jill, you walk in those.
And faster. And I was just at the Pentagon recently, and I think there's just obviously a will, and there's a machine that's being set up, and it's back to the speed. But back to this whole point is, no company should be reliant on government contracts, okay, ever. And so if 5 years ago, let's put it 10 years ago, most of the highest level of value technology was actually for the US, was coming out of the Department of Defense. Now it's completely flipped, which is why DIU was set up, because it's all now coming from the commercial side. It is now being driven by the commercial side, and in VCs, we know this, and that's where we are funding. But when I'm talking about the catalog capabilities, I'm going to push back on you on this, is because the VCs here are also trying to figure out yes, there is a lot of supply, but where's the dual use supply? And that's where the EIC, that's where I think EIC and EIF and a lot of these, and universities, and the procurement piece is essential. But I'm talking to a lot of MODs right now, and they want to work, but there are places like Poland where you're not even allowed, the MOD, Ministry of Defense, is not even allowed to work with the universities. Well, this is just wrong. And so there has to be a lot of revision across the EU in order to incentivize corporations, in order to make it easier for MODs to be able to access the research, be able to fund it. And so this is, yes, a system has to be built, and the connective tissue is exactly what is lacking across Europe on every level. And so it is, what do you have? How can we fund it? Who's going to buy it? Right? And how is it we're going to scale it?
Absolutely.
DARPA is
Yes.
always mentioned. DARPA is a procurement instrument, and we lack that in Europe. It's something big. And that's why the US has been leading in many of these technologies, is because they did have DARPA. So that has to be added to the mix at a European level or at a national level. And I think in the Netherlands, we're now considering it. But Christian, I think you've been pushing it. But to make that work means that you have to have a lot of sophistication and have the best people actually doing that kind of work. And that's sometimes a tall order. But I think, Stephen, you know a little about it.
You have questions?
I can add last like 2
Yes,
seconds to
because
that.
I want to give the
'Cause
chance to.
I completely agree with DARPA. DARPA is a research agency, right? It's federally funded grants for the most part like they fund research. Sorry, they're a research focused agency. They're not a research internal agency. That is a critical part of the ecosystem. And I think especially in Europe, like there's so much good research that's happening that is too early to be venture funded. And that's where an agency like that is very visionary, because they're able to fund things that are like far too in advance because it's in the national interest, right? And then the technology gets sufficiently mature where it's ready to be turned into a product, civilian or government, and then venture capital takes over and says, hey, we're going to back this and give it a shot at greatness. So I think it's a conveyor belt, and the pieces have to be there.
Thank you for bringing us home, Stephen. Yeah, I agree.
So that you also know DARPA does invest in European companies. BehaviorSec was a company, they had 2 grants from DARPA before we decided to invest. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that.
Thank you for that. I want to give the chance to our audience to ask questions. No way, Władek. We can continue with the panel. We have half an hour. We have a good amount of time for questions and answers, so don't hesitate. There's no taboo. So please show your hands. Władek, you were the first one. Introduce yourselves. Yes?
Yeah, I do have a flight at 2 o'clock.
Okay. When do you have to leave?
I will have to leave in 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes. Okay, whoever has questions to Constantine.
Yes.
Okay. Pushkar.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the panel. I learned a lot. I'm Pushkar Apte with SEMI. We exchanged emails. My question is for you, Constantine. I really liked what you said about the challenges of deep tech and the demand side and so forth. My quick question is that in many cases in deep tech, you need to connect the dots across multiple silos to make something work. So for example, let's say energy efficiency for the AI factories or things like that. You know, Netherlands is very strong in photonics as an example. That is one technology that can be applied to that. I know you have to catch a flight. Very quick question. Yeah, the very quick question is, as you're thinking of supporting the ecosystem, right? Do you have systems in place to help connect the dots across these silos of software, semiconductors, photonics, various things that all come together as a solution for a particular problem?
Great question. Thank you.
Well, in your question, it assumes that engineering, kind of a system engineering that will pull this all together, and I think that would be a typically European way to look at it. That is, what I've seen here is actually now, because the scarcity of compute and energy, that now the software people start thinking about how can we solve this through the whole value chain. Everybody's thinking about performance and energy efficiency, latency, all those kind of things, and that's what actually makes a difference. If we try to arrange this in an efficient, kind of systemic way, I think we'll be far too slow. And so, it's been very hard. I mean, we're talking to how we get startups, for instance, to connect with a company like ASML. it's super hard. They have very long roadmaps. They have are optimized to the last like meter, and they don't want a disruptor of a startup in. So if you to get to work with those companies, it's even harder than to work with a prime. And it requires a lot of sophistication. So what we try to do is put them together so that they are in the same networks. We try to get the experts from ASML to talk to the startup and say, well, basically give very kind of tough love view on these companies. Would we ever work with you? Don't try to keep the dream alive. I said, no, we wouldn't work with you because you're not adding to our performance. You're not, and we can't actually integrate you in our value chain. And if they can, well, they could still give a lot of expertise in terms of, especially industrial scaling, where these companies typically don't have that much. And because a lot of innovation, but 80% of all the innovation does go in the actual product, but goes into the production process, and that it can help. So that's what we try to do: build kind of resilient ecosystems, and then, but we I think shy away from trying to direct the whole value chain and try to be as efficient as possible, because that's really hard to do.
No, that was exactly my question: how to foster partnerships. I was not suggesting one ring to rule them all. That's not correct.
No, but like a company of ASML, by themselves, they didn't do this. They were very much focused on the roadmap, so they didn't do any venturing. Coming back to the point earlier raised that European corporates don't do enough in supporting or working with startups. Now the next leadership is more concerned about that. They need to diversify. They're of course at the level of maturity that there's also boundaries to physics. So they're looking at other business models and working also with the whole community. And so you'll start seeing that these companies are actually, as a part of their strategy, are going to work much more with startups. But they don't always. I mean, also in a kind of more generous way. I mean, they're actually giving away and paying forward into the ecosystem what they weren't doing before, because they saw it as a distraction.
Thank you. Wojtek, do you want to ask your question? Wait for the mic.
Hello, my name is Władysław. I come from Poland. I just incorporated in States, so I am the European that left, basically. And first of all, my question to all the Europeans here is, when will Europe start putting its money where its political mouth is? Which I think that when you talk about privacy, where are my private European LLMs, right? When you talk about privacy, where are my private devices that keep me private, right? There is none. So yeah, so that's a big problem. Then thank you for the panel. It was very interesting. And with the politics, we can go further. I just don't want to take your time. It was very interesting. And I think each one of you told a lot about the problem, that a little bit unconscious problem, that is the lack of business innovation and not innovation as a whole. We have tremendous industry, as you said. So as a founder, here I have a choice. In Europe, you, Alberto, have a choice, right? You can choose among founders. I can choose here among investors, right? Here as a founder, I can meet people like you, Julian, at the university. At the European university, first of all, we don't pay our best academics well, so they just cannot be angels. Like, they cannot. Second of all, they don't work at the industry, or they rarely do. So they're theoretical, and they cannot be angels because of that. And third of all, and I think most important of all, is that business is hated at the academy in Europe, basically. So when you say you do business, even students look at you the wrong way, right? And this is bad. Like, this is not for innovation. This is horrible. And then and so I think that it's a powerhouse, but it's scared of itself, so it doesn't use its power. You know, we have a very bad history of things. I don't want to mention them, right? I am from Poland. I know it very well. We have been victims of that in the recent history, right? Yes.
Get
So
to
my
the
question to
question.
you.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys. My question to you is how can we put the whole business innovation process so we can do something with the drones in the after the war, right? How can we put this in the whole society, into the whole process of human development, from school to university to after university to industry, because this is it doesn't exist there, and in the United States it exists.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Well, to that point, I think it's a cultural thing. So it is hard, culture with strategy, or culture eats strategy for breakfast, or I don't know how it is. I think, and I've experienced this also in the Netherlands, where startup policy is a policy, and then you've got industrial policy, and you've got digital policy, and you've got all these policies, but they don't kind of gel together. What you do see in other countries, you see it in India, you see it, of course, in China, you see it in the UAE now, where and you saw it in Estonia, you saw it actually also in the UK in the sort of last 20 years. That when you start looking at your economy much more through the lens of the entrepreneur, and then you're seeing that venture capital is actually a crucial part of that, you start looking very differently in how you do economic policy, and I think that's a really important shift. That the startup is not like a kind of an SME, but it's a growth vehicle for transformation. And you can't do transformations if you only look at universities, or you only look at government, or you only look at corporates. The disruptive transformation will not come from there. It will come from venture capital, and it will come from entrepreneurs. And for instance, in my country, we are very proud of what we call triple helix. And this is gonna be an insult to a lot of people, but I think that is such a ridiculous concept, because it's the legacy interest. It's government, it's university, and it's business. But the investors with skin in the game, and the entrepreneurs who are risking themselves to disrupt and build something new and big, are never at the table. And I think they are the ones that you should put at the center. And once you start doing that, and once you start thinking that through, then a lot of things can change. But if that doesn't happen, it will always be like a sideshow, and I don't think we'll be able to compete with countries that have done this much more effectively.
Thank you so much. I'd like to give a round of applause to Constantine. We still have a few minutes, so I would say bye to Constantine. Thank you so much for being with us. And we still have a few minutes for questions from the audience. Yeah. Safe travels, Constantine. Thank you.
Can I just make a note on this
Sure.
question? So I teach a course called Hacking Defense at Stanford Business School. And basically, this is the model that I feel needs to be stood up across all industries, not just defense. It is the students at Stanford Business School, a subset of them apply to this class, and it's very rigorous to get in. But what we do is we take those students and we team them up with agencies, with FBI, with the CIA, with space, with different intelligence agencies, who give these students a specific problem to solve that they need, whether it's around a missile, whether it's around a defense mechanism, a submarine mechanism, whether it's around AI-produced synthetic viruses that the FBI is worried about, and bioterrorism, whatever it is, it's very specific problem. These students then work on this for 10 weeks, and they build a minimum viable product. That product is then in a demo day at the very end, and VCs come and they sit there, and these 368 companies have come out of just this class. This Hacking Defense is all throughout the US and in the UK, and this is a model for procurement. You have a customer built in that's identified a problem that needs to be solved by students. Okay, you have a lot of great students, but bring in the research community as well, And now you have other companies larger, that it's not just the primes. And so we need to create more of this type of model where everybody is connected, where everybody is actually working on a qualified problem that will deliver a benefit to all shareholders. When I say all shareholders, Brian Chesky, who started Airbnb, talked about the 21st century business model. That is to deliver a return to employees, to customers, to shareholders, and to society. And I think that this is something that Europe has to wrap their hand around connecting these dots and looking at the models here in the US and all over the world. What works? What can we set up? What can we replicate? And that's my thought on that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You're a founder, right? Yeah, just do it. Just go. Like that's the only thing holding, like all the stuff that she was talking about, all true, right? But like you go to Stanford, completely unstructured, completely chaotic. There is no central planning for how startups come out and how VCs meet them. There's a bunch of classes. Like the underlying theme is if you find a severe pain point and you are passionate about solving that problem, give it a go. Go for it. Just do it. And then capital will find you customers. You will connect with them. They'll want your product. Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. Doesn't work. Try it again with something else. Like the difference culturally is just doing it. The discussion is irrelevant, right? The action is what matters.
Mike.
But I think you need an ecosystem that also supports that. So Stanford is an ecosystem that supports that. There are a lot of other ecosystems here in the United States that supports that. The United States as a whole is an ecosystem that supports that.
Thank you. All right, I can see Thomas and Christian.
Okay. We'll take them both together.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the mic. My name is Thomas Norbert. First of all, one of the best panels that I have heard for a very long time. And I agree with every single opinion that I have heard, particularly because you are looking through various different lenses. And I have a very practical questions. The EU, we as Europeans, I think we have to give us, first of all, a little bit more credit than we always try to be more, pessimistic and negative and whatever. I have seen a lot of progress over the last, particularly 2 years, on every level, even the culture, the programs, the entrepreneurship, everything. Yes, we have some shortcomings. I have a very practical question. At the moment, I'm working with 4 seed stage companies out of the Netherlands, out of Spain, out of Germany, and Israel. All 4 of them made the decision to flip the company very early to a C Corp in Delaware. And the primary reason, and the question is, are they wrong? And are we missing something out in Europe when it comes to additional funding? The primary motivation is because the legal barriers are easier over here to start a company. The second is what Konstantin said earlier, the density of talent over here. And the third one is speed of execution. And in AI, I think execution and speed of execution is almost everything. Are these companies are making a mistake? Should they have stayed in Europe? And if they are coming over here, do they still, with a subsidiary, are liable for investments out of the EIC in general?
We'll take another question. Is your question for someone in particular? Everybody? Okay, just a second.
Thank you. Oh, yes. Christian van Hoede, work for the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs, working on a Dutch DARPA. So that's also why Constantine give a shout out to me. I'm very keen to sort of see what are the critical success factors. I mean, you did mention a lot of them already, sort of the signaling of interest, of the procurement interest that there are from the agencies. I would say, we have tried a couple of things in the past, like small business innovation research, but you often then see that sort of then lacks at a proof of concept phase, and then it never really goes anywhere after that. So what is really needed to make sure that you really have that whole roadmap from the DARPA moment, the moonshots, all up until the final procurement, as to say. And at the other end, very specifically, Alberto, I was wondering, you said that you advise companies not to take an investment from InQtel, right?
No,
okay.
Oh,
okay.
InQtel is one of our largest co-investors.
Yeah.
They're
But
standalone. They're not a part of the government.
No, I know. Sorry, then I misunderstood what you said. But you mean to sell, to immediately go into procurement, or so? What is kind of your? But that sort of, I mean, seems to be a bit at odds at what we discussed about DARPA and that whole pipeline and the supportive role. So I was sort of keen how you merge those two together.
Right.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alberto, for taking both questions.
On both answers, it's not a mistake. It's great that they got a C corp. It doesn't mean they need to come to the U.S. They have a vehicle where they have a structure. Some funds are restricted to invest in the U.S. and putting the funds into Delaware and then feeding them into Europe. It's okay. It's great. So don't assume that because you created a C corporation, you're migrating the whole business. Yes, it's speed. It's great that you have it. There's a lot more corporate protections. It'll help you tell the European, saying they have a lot of good governance, and that could be mirrored over Europe. So don't hesitate and continue to do that model. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. I keep it in Europe in my mind, and eventually you really want to. Eventually, it's a business decision where you want to keep it. Turning it over to you. In-Q-Tel is my comment, just to clarify. We discourage our companies to sell to the government because they take a long time, and a procurement cycle could be anywhere between 18 to 24 months. As venture capitalists, if we don't show progress in 24 months, we're dead. We need to return multiples of capital. So just let's figure out what the real model of VC. VC is our business. Is not to fall in love with our companies. Is to foment innovation, but at the same time, our shareholders expect returns. And it has to be within a time period. Since I was on the other side as an entrepreneur, I never thought about that. But yeah, today I report to all my LPs that my funds are going to return capital. If I don't do that, I'm no longer a viable investor. Going back to In-Q-Tel and DARPA, those are incredible seeds, and we always look for DARPA invested companies or In-Q-Tel invested companies. Why? Because they have had government funding. They have been guided because DARPA puts program managers. It's not like they say, oh, here, have $5 million. No, they give you a very specific problem. They assign a very senior in a team. There is a program manager to be able to help you that. And whatever comes out of it, most of the time, not all the time, becomes a viable, potentially funded company. So we like, and In-Q-Tel just makes a lot of bets based on the community. It primarily is the intelligence community. It's not DoD. Many people confuse it. In-Q-Tel doesn't make decisions for DoD. It only does for the intelligence community, which is a very small component of the DoD budget, by the way. But having an In-Q-Tel investment, it's a seal of approval that says, oh, wow, these guys, somebody, because In-Q-Tel has technology people, maybe like you, I don't know if you're a business or investor, but before they make an investment, they look at the whole landscape, they make due diligence. They usually call us and say, hey, we're looking at this company, what do you think? And oftentimes we co-invest together. And so there's a good gateway, and we don't make the assumption that because it's an In-Q-Tel company, it's going to be successful in the government. We always say that In-Q-Tel problem that has been solved by a group, now we can take it to the commercial sector, not the government. So don't confuse that.
Maybe then, from my end, you would say sort of the government procurement is a sort of nice bycatch, rather than sort of the primary things you have to go for, but rather do it more in the early phases.
Yeah, government procurement will give more credibility to a DARPA and In-Q-Tel based invested company because they've been vetted and they may be ready because they're solving a real problem.
Yeah. So I love everything he said. I'll emphasize two of the points. I think the first is part of the reason In-Q-Tel has so much weight when they make an investment decision or when they come in is because they're one of the smartest investors, period, globally. Like the people that they hire into that organization on a global level to do technical diligence are second to none, right? And they work with other excellent people in the private sector, but they are incredibly sophisticated. So if you want to build like a successful DARPA or In-Q-Tel or something else in another country, you have to be at, like, for example, the CIA is recruiting at every career fair at Berkeley, Stanford, Caltech, et cetera. You have to hire the best technical people in the fields you want to support. and build that credibility, and then that compounds, right? So I think that is, and then on the other side, I go to InQtel's CEO Summit every year, very, very close with the senior leadership there, and the way they're thinking about the areas in which they invest, because they have teams in Europe and all over the world, right? The way they're thinking about where they invest is like, what are the commercial opportunities coming out of research that we can then utilize internally, but more importantly, that we can prepare to be utilized internally. They don't make any procurement decisions, nor should they. But what they do is they say, okay, at the InQtel Summit, for example, we're going to get all of our CEOs together and have a master class by the person who heads procurement within the DoD to understand exactly what the terms mean, exactly how to approach them. Here are the teams. Like, all founders really need is someone to just lay out the complexity of government and say, here's how you navigate it, period. Here's a person you can go to that can support you navigating it. Like, we're not going to guarantee you get a contract. We're not going to do it for you. You're not going to come to us to do that negotiation. But like, we will arm you with this knowledge that most people don't know, right? Like, most founders have no idea how to navigate the US or anywhere else, right?
In terms of EU, so back to your point, a lot of companies come here to the United States and they want to gain funding. They want to gain access to the market, but the EU companies are not properly educated in terms of what the competitive landscape is. What are the points of entry that would be best for them, whether it be in healthcare, whether it be in climate change, whether the states that work best with them. So there's complexities here in the United States in terms of how to enter this market. It's not like all the complexities are in Europe. They're very much so. And so I think that we have to do a better job in terms of, as you're talking about, this bridge is to educate one another. And I think that in terms of, I have a number of companies that I've invested into Europe. 2,000, 3,000, 10,000 employees are in Europe, but they have here in the United States 10 people. Okay, they're a Dell Corp. They have 10 people here, and they get funding because they are a Dell Corp, because it's part of the LPA, the limited partner agreements, in order to do that, right? So they can't. So it's a matter of creating more of an understanding of each other's policies, of each other's frameworks, of each other's, actually competitive landscapes is really, really important for us to enter Europe, for Europe to enter here. And that's what we can do best in terms of, when I call myself an innovation diplomat, it's to educate each other, to encourage each other, to deepen our alliances, to really elevate global security. And I think that's one of the ways that we can do this. And that's why you have these sessions, and I've gone to a number of them, and I give you a lot of credit, because you're really elevating people and helping each other to understand our needs, our demand signals, and how we can learn from each other.
Thank you for that, Gillian. I'll give you the last question, very short. And then I'd like to hear very short closing remarks from all of you, just the message that you want the audience to bring with them. And in the audience, we have government representatives, students, founders, VCs, civil society. So think about your last message.
Alejandro, and it's a comment, actually, not a question, but it's happening already. I just moved here from DC 2 months ago to help build a team, which I met already a couple of people here. We help international founders at JP Morgan enter the US market through a sub, through not a sub. We help them sort of connect them. And that came out of a normal sort of need that we've been seeing from the Global Corporate Bank of exactly the same things you're outlining, just the overall need of bridge, and then to provide global banking and sort of all that. But just seeing that has been a natural growth of our team, and an exciting opportunity.
Thank you.
Creating connective tissue for many, many years, whether it be subsets of healthcare, where, obviously, but now also defense. And we just came out with you just came out with a very big announcement around that allocation, around the intentionality of investing into that sector and creating more of the connective tissue that I think is really important. So I want to thank JP Morgan for always being a leader on the front, and also seeing that Europe is playing a significant role more than ever, and them amplifying that is very good because it really initiates more interest into Europe from the rest of the investment communities.
Thank you. Stephen, Alberto?
Super quick. I just want to circle back to your question. You were asking about domiciling, right? I think in deep tech in particular, it's actually a really interesting moment where it's not necessarily better to domicile in the US. But we actually help a lot of American companies extract IP from the US and domicile in Europe. Because if you want to sell to a global market and you're placed under ITAR restrictions for a space tech company or a cybersecurity company or a model company, you can't actually sell into the global market if you're domiciled in the US. So the answer to your question is actually very much nuanced in what is the technology, what are the restrictions that any government would place on the IP of that technology, what are the markets that you want to sell into, and how do you create your corporate structure such that you can take advantage of a global market, both for talent and for customers.
Thank you. I don't think this is something that everyone knows, so thanks for bringing that up. Final thoughts. We're at time. Thank you so much.
I'll keep mine brief. I think we want to build the transatlantic bridge for seed stage deep tech founders between the industrial bases of the US and Europe. And so anyone who's interested in building that bridge with us, reach out.
Thank you. Alberto?
Drumbeat Capital.
Is there?
The best thing that JP Morgan can do is buy from European companies before giving them money or any loans. So thank you for coming over. But and I know that your team, you have very active teams in London and other places where you welcome a lot of European entrepreneurs to sell to you guys. You know, this is a policy-based meeting. Policy is important to enable and build those bridges. But like you said, we're not waiting for those policies to happen. We're investing. We're open for business. We've done 6 investments in Europe. We will continue to do that. And we want to be able to collaborate with many of you to figure out, bring us new innovative companies. We can help give you the best of the US and Europe. Our goal is to drive innovation on a global basis. And like I always put the analogy that people talk about is the Champions League. And where's the Champions League? It's in Europe, right? And anyway, it's basically, you don't have to be successful just because you sell in the US. There's a big global market to be there. And it takes, you know, a lot of different perspectives to be working together. So we're sold, we're already doing it. We're not waiting. Yeah, we of course want to be able to have more capital to be able to deploy, but that's just secondary. We will get it.
Thank you. Gillian?
Yeah, I've been investing for decades, as a lot of us have. And what I've learned over the years, and I was an early investor in Applied Materials and Oracle and Tesla and Uber and a lot of great companies. But what I've learned and what we actually value the most here in the United States and Europe needs to prioritize because they have so much talent is people. And we always say that it's rarely, I always say there's rarely products that fail. Actually, it's people. And so how do we invest into people? We here in the US, we invest in people. We provide founders with more tools. We provide them with incentives. We don't tax them. We actually elevate them. And I think that Europe has so much incredible talent that we need to invest more into the talent, to the people, as well as the policies, and be able to elevate and amplify their skills, especially with AI hovering or encroaching on all of our worlds. But I always see that it's the people, it's the relationships that makes us valuable. And that's what we have to invest more into.
Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much for the audience. Thank you for being here.